moment of truth, really. After traveling 1,000 miles, searching the cliffs for hours and hours, and finally collecting a tree that we liked, now we have to open up the root ball and see what we've really got and whether we've really made a good job or made a mess of what we were doing here. Now if we can focus in on the bottom of this, you can see that this is not really dirt. This is a solid mat of roots. And that's why you can get by with a relatively small root system like this. It would be nice if this went all the way around the tree, and we frequently get them like that. But this is very good the way it is. I mean, this tree has an excellent chance, I would say. Now we don't want to pot the tree necessarily in this, it's got soil around it mixed in with the roots. And it's got a lot of, basically this soil is composed of some clay and some old decomposed juniper needles. And so basically what we do usually, what I like to do anyway, is just kind of take a pressure sprayer and not too roughly, but I want to wash away as much of that excess stuff as I can without really getting into it. I mean, I don't really want to cause a lot of disruption in the root system right now, but anything that's just kind of loose, mucky stuff, I want to get that off, and I want to open this up. I don't know if you can see there, this root here, even though it was very dry up on the mountain, the root system is growing right now. We usually think of the roots as growing only in the spring and fall, but I think at high elevations where the growing season is very short, the roots grow whenever they can, basically, which means if you get a little bit of a wet spell in the summer or whatever, the roots will grow. So what I'm trying to do is just open this up enough so that after I put this in a pot, this root system will be able to breathe and we'll be able to have air and water flow through it. Alright, that's about good enough. I don't really want to open this thing completely up. It's pretty well known that it's kind of hazardous to interfere with the root system too much at this point. But I've got it opened up enough that I think water and air can get in there to some extent. So now I've prepared a box, a wooden box. I could put this tree in a bonsai pot, but I think a wooden box is at least as good as a bonsai pot. One of the reasons being that you know, a wooden box will not get nearly so hot, and it's much more conducive to rooting a new plant. So this is kind of a heavy plant. We might have to use some guy wires to hold this one in place. I'm not sure yet. But I've got 3 sets of wires here. The first set to go over this piece of root that I deliberately left when I freed the tree. I left it just for this purpose here to help hold the tree in place. And that will do quite a bit right there. Okay, now we want to fill the rest of the pot with soil, making sure that we don't leave any gaps underneath. The soil mix I use is just pure turfus and about, probably 25% crushed pine bark. That seems to work good for a lot of different coniferous plants. If I have it, I also mix in a little bit of number 3 turkey grit to kind of make it a little coarser. I don't have any right now. But basically just something that's very kind of porous and open, and will let a lot of air and water into the root system and back out again without trapping anything in there. These ones we're not going to do very tight because I don't want them to crush those fine roots. Just kind of lay those in there like that. So now I will attach some guy wires to the sides of the pot. The tree, as you can see, still wiggles a little bit. And when you're trying to get something started as a transplant, you really want it to be locked in there. I'm going to water this tree very thoroughly, and I'm going to put it in a cold frame where it's in the shade, a white poly house basically. It'll stay in the shade, and it'll be misted every day. Until I start really seeing a lot of new growth. Although these trees come from almost a desert environment, they really respond well once you transplant them to shade and to a higher humidity environment, and that really seems to help them get established very quickly. So I would say this tree has an excellent chance. Everything went very well. Alright, well here we have our too big for a bonsai. And let's get the roots ready and put this one into a pot. I guess first thing we don't need to have it tagged anymore. Throw that away. And just kind of spray this off and get rid of the excess of that stuff. Now it's well known that pine trees especially depend on mycorrhizae on the roots, and you really don't want to bare root these things. But you know, if we leave say a pretty good mat of the original material around in here, and we can free up all the ends a little bit, it'll actually help the plant transplant quite a bit. But if I got a good solid tree, I'll try and get all the what I call the excess of the root pad off, the stuff that doesn't really have roots in it, that's just dirt or duff or whatever it is. Try and get all that stuff off of there, and hose it off so that it's got roots sticking out all around the edges and on the bottom and the top. I pot it in a kind of a porous growing mix with a little bit of pine bark in it. And then ideally, and I don't always have room to do that for every tree, so I'm kind of selective. The ones that seem weaker get more care than the ones that had a really robust root system. But you know, I like to put them, if I can, in a shade house and mist them every day. And what I've found is like the junipers and the spruces really respond well to that. The pines respond to it to some extent, but not as much. You know, the pines, you can almost just set them right out in the sun right away, and they don't seem to mind that. But if you have one that's weak or something, it definitely gives it a boost to put it in the shade and kind of keep it misty. But you don't want to keep the soil soaked, you just want to keep it humid in there. Well, I said this tree was too big for bonsai, and it is. But luckily for me, I happen to have a pot that's too big for bonsai too. And I think it's just the right size for this tree, which was one reason I thought it might be a good one to collect if we can lay it in there. Okay, now we want to fill the rest of the pot with soil. Making sure that we don't leave any gaps underneath.